The morning they laughed at me for cleaning coffee stains off the executive conference table was the same morning I approved the paperwork that would decide which of them still had a job by Friday. Most people never notice janitors unless the trash overflows or the bathroom smells wrong. I learned that a long time ago. When you push a gray cleaning cart through polished hallways, people look through you the way they look through windows. They keep talking while you wipe crumbs off their desks. They answer emails while you empty their garbage cans. They complain about their lives in front of you because they think a woman holding a mop has no story worth listening to. My name is Eleanor Price, though almost nobody at Belmere Technologies knew that. To them, I was just Ellie, the old cleaning lady who arrived before sunrise with orthopedic shoes that squeaked softly against marble floors. I wore the same pale blue work shirt every day, tied my silver hair back with the same black ribbon, and carried peppermint candies in my apron pocket because the elevators smelled like burnt coffee and stress by 7 in the morning. The building itself always smelled cold before the employees arrived. Lemon disinfectant, dust trapped inside carpet fibers, fresh printer ink, the faint metallic scent of rain blowing through the revolving doors downstairs. I liked those quiet hours before the office woke up. There was honesty in silence. At 6:15 every morning, I cleaned the 22nd floor first. That was where the executives worked. Long glass walls, white leather chairs, expensive artwork nobody really looked at. Sometimes I would pause beside the windows and watch the city waking up beneath me, headlights sliding through fog like tiny lanterns. It reminded me how small people become when they forget kindness. I founded Belmere 31 years earlier with my late husband, Walter, in a garage that smelled like solder smoke and wet cardboard. Back then we ate canned soup for dinner and worked until our hands cramped. Walter handled engineering. I handled people. We built the company slowly, carefully, like planting a tree we hoped would shade someone long after we were gone. After Walter died, I stepped away from public leadership. The board wanted younger faces, sharper suits, louder voices. They thought age made people invisible. I let them think that. 3 years earlier, after hearing complaints about cruelty inside the company, I returned quietly under a different name with only the board chairman aware of who I really was. I wanted to see who people became when they believed nobody important was watching. The answer disappointed me more often than I expected. Around 7:30, employees started pouring and carrying iced coffees and expensive backpacks. Their laughter echoed through the halls before the work even began. Some were polite enough. A few thanked me when I held elevator doors, but others treated me like part of the furniture, especially Derek Lawson. I heard him before I saw him most mornings because his shoes struck the floor too hard. Derek was a regional operations manager in his early 30s with perfect hair and the habit of speaking louder whenever he wanted attention. That morning, he walked into the conference room while I was wiping fingerprints from the table. "Careful there," he said to the younger associates behind him. "One wrong move and she'll put us all out of business." The room burst into small laughs. I kept wiping the table. Another man added, "Honestly, she probably knows this building better than management does." Derek smirked. "That's not exactly a high-paying skill." Their laughter bounced against the glass walls while I folded my cloth carefully and placed it back into the bucket. My hands remained steady. Years teach you that humiliation only works when you accept the role someone assigns you. As I passed Derek, he didn't move aside. I had to angle my cart around him. "Morning, Ellie," he said without looking up from his phone. His tone carried that casual cruelty some people mistake for confidence. "Good morning," I answered softly. I still remember the smell of his cologne lingering behind me after I left the room. Sharp cedarwood. Expensive. Forgettable. Not everyone treated me badly. A young intern named Maya often helped me carry supply boxes when the elevator stalled. She had nervous eyes and ink stains on her fingers from taking notes too quickly. One rainy morning, she found me struggling with a vacuum cord tangled around the wheels of my cart. "You shouldn't lift that by yourself," she said. "I've lifted heavier things than this," I told her. She smiled. "Still, doesn't mean you should." That simple sentence stayed with me all day because kindness sounds different when it's genuine. It arrives quietly. Around noon, I sat alone in the basement break room, eating tomato soup from a thermos Walter had bought me 20 years earlier. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere upstairs, phones rang endlessly. I could hear footsteps through the ceiling tiles. That was when Harold Bennett called. Harold was chairman of the board and one of the few people who knew the truth. "You sound tired," he said gently. "I am tired. You don't have to keep doing this." I stared at the steam rising from my soup. "Yes, I do." "You've already seen enough." "No," I whispered. "I've seen exactly what happens when people think power belongs only to them." Harold sighed softly through the phone. "The acquisition vote is Friday. Once the new investors come in, things will change permanently." "I know. You still haven't told anyone who you are?" I looked around the empty room, at the peeling paint beside the vending machines and the old mop bucket drying near the sink. "Not yet." After the call ended, I remained there a long time listening to the hum of refrigeration units and distant laughter upstairs. There's a particular loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who would treat you differently if they knew your name. That afternoon, I walked into the executive lounge, carrying fresh towels, and nearly collided with Vanessa Cole from Human Resources. She wrinkled her nose immediately. "God!" she muttered, waving a hand lightly. "Smells like bleach in here." "I just finished sanitizing the counters," I said. "Well, maybe next time wait until after the meeting. Some of us are trying to eat." I apologized, even though the schedule, hanging on the wall, clearly instructed cleaning before lunch meetings. Vanessa rolled her eyes and walked away balancing a salad container against her hip. A few minutes later, I heard her whispering to another employee near the coffee machine. "She's everywhere lately." "I know," the other woman replied quietly. "Honestly, it's depressing." Depressing. Funny word to use for another human being. That evening, while emptying trash bins outside Derek's office, I noticed something strange. The quarterly employee review files sat open across his desk, marked with handwritten notes. Most were normal observations: productivity, attendance, performance. But beside Maya's name, Derek had written one sentence in thick black ink: "Too soft for leadership." I stared at those words longer than I should have. Earlier that same day, I had watched Maya give half her lunch to a security guard working overtime because he'd forgotten his wallet at home. Too soft. Sometimes the world confuses cruelty with competence. Before leaving for the night, I rode the elevator down alone. The mirrored walls reflected an old woman with tired eyes and cleaning gloves tucked into her apron. Nobody looking at that reflection would have guessed I owned 61% of the company above us. As the elevator descended, I remembered something Walter used to tell me when business deals went badly. "Character doesn't appear during hard times," he'd say quietly. "Hard times just uncover what was already there." The doors opened into the empty lobby. Rain streaked the glass entrance outside, turning city lights blurry and gold. I pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders and paused beside the reception desk where a framed photograph of Belmere's founding team still sat. My younger face smiled back at me from behind the glass. Most employees passed that photograph every day without ever recognizing the woman holding the coffee mug in the back row. And upstairs, while they mocked the janitor cleaning their floors, the company they thought belonged to ambitious men in tailored suits still quietly belonged to me. Stay with me, because what happens next changed everything. The first time I realized something deeper was wrong inside Belmere wasn't because someone insulted me. I had endured enough disrespect in life to understand the difference between arrogance and decay. What unsettled me was how comfortable people had become watching cruelty happen without saying a word. It started with small things. A young receptionist crying quietly in the restroom after being blamed for a scheduling mistake that wasn't hers. A warehouse worker eating dinner alone in his car because supervisors mocked his stutter during meetings. Employees speaking kindly to executives, then turning cold the moment those executives walked away. The entire building carried this strange tension beneath its polished surface, like everyone was holding their breath all the time. I noticed it most during evenings. Offices reveal truth after hours. When people get tired, their masks loosen. One Tuesday night, I was vacuuming near the accounting department when I overheard Derek speaking to Vanessa beside the printers. Their voices were low, but sharp enough to cut through the mechanical hum. "She's embarrassing," Derek said. "Who?" "The intern. Maya. She follows that janitor around like it's some charity project." Vanessa laughed softly. "Well, maybe she sees her future." I stopped vacuuming for a second. There was silence, then Derek spoke again. "People like Ellie should honestly be grateful just to have jobs. Half the older staff here can barely keep up." The printer beeped. Paper slid into trays. Somebody nearby stirred sugar into coffee. Then Derek said something that sat heavy in my chest for days afterward. "You know what the problem with this company is? Too many sentimental people." I continued vacuuming before they noticed the silence, but my hands shook slightly after that. Because Belmere had been built on sentiment once, on loyalty, on believing workers deserved dignity whether they cleaned floors or signed contracts. That night, I drove home through steady rain with the windshield wipers clicking back and forth like a metronome. My house sat near the edge of the lake outside the city, hidden behind old maple trees. It wasn't flashy. Walter and I had never cared much about showing wealth. The porch light glowed warm against the darkness as I unlocked the front door. Inside, the silence felt heavier than usual. I heated leftover tea and sat at the kitchen table staring at the company reports Harold had sent over earlier that week. Profits were climbing. Investors were happy. Expansion looked strong on paper. But culture doesn't appear on spreadsheets. I kept thinking about Maya. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. The sky outside still carried that bluish darkness before dawn, and the building smelled faintly of wet umbrellas and industrial carpet cleaner. While wiping down the executive kitchen counters, I heard quiet sniffing from inside one of the conference rooms. Maya sat alone at the table, staring at her laptop screen. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes. "You all right?" I asked gently. She startled slightly. "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." People always say that first. I stepped closer. "You don't look fine." For a moment, she tried smiling, but it collapsed halfway. "I worked on a proposal for 3 weeks," she whispered. "Derek presented it yesterday like it was his idea." Something inside me went still. "What happened when you said something?" She looked down at her hands. "He told me that if I wanted to survive in corporate life, I needed thicker skin." Outside the glass walls, employees passed carrying coffees and laptops. Nobody looked inside. "He also said," Maya continued carefully, "that maybe I wasn't leadership material." I felt cold despite the warmth of the room. Those exact words again. I sat beside her quietly. "Do you know what leadership actually looks like?" She shrugged weakly. "It looks like making people feel safe enough to do good work." Her eyes watered again, though she tried hiding it. "You remind me of someone I used to know," I told her. "Who?" "Myself." She laughed softly through her tears at that, probably assuming I meant when I was younger and cleaning other offices decades ago. I didn't correct her. Later that afternoon, another strange thing happened. I entered the boardroom, carrying fresh water pitchers, and found Derek arguing with Harold Bennett. Their voices stopped immediately when they noticed me. Derek rolled his eyes. "Can we get some privacy?" Harold ignored him. "It's all right, Ellie. Go ahead." I placed the water carefully on the table, while Derek stared at me impatiently. His irritation radiated through the room like heat. As I turned to leave, I heard Harold say quietly, "Culture matters more than quarterly numbers." Derek scoffed. "Investors don't care about feelings." I kept walking, but those words followed me down the hallway long after the doors closed behind me. That evening, while cleaning Derek's office again, I noticed another document left open carelessly across his desk. Normally, I wouldn't read private files, but a highlighted sentence caught my eye immediately. Potential staff reductions after acquisition. Below it sat a list of departments considered non-essential. Maintenance was first. I lowered myself slowly into the chair across from his desk, staring at the page while the city glowed outside his office windows. My chest felt tight. Dozens of workers, custodians, security guards, cafeteria staff, people who had spent years keeping Belmere functioning quietly in the background. Disposable, that was the word scribbled beside the proposal. For the first time since returning undercover, anger rose sharp enough to surprise me. Not because my own position was threatened. Nobody there could remove me from my own company, but because of how casually people erase others once they stop seeing them as human beings. The next few days became harder. Derek grew bolder with his comments. Vanessa stopped acknowledging me entirely. During meetings, employees interrupted quieter coworkers constantly while executives praised aggressive personalities like they were signs of intelligence. And yet, small moments of goodness kept appearing too. A security guard named Luis fixing my broken cartwheel without being asked. Maya bringing me cinnamon tea because she noticed my cough lingering. A mailroom employee staying late to help another worker finish packages before a storm arrived. Human beings are complicated that way. Darkness and kindness existing in the same building, sometimes on the same floor. The next few days became harder. Derek grew bolder with his comments. Vanessa stopped acknowledging me entirely. During meetings, employees interrupted quieter coworkers constantly while executives praised aggressive personalities like they were signs of intelligence. And yet, small moments of goodness kept appearing too. A security guard named Luis fixing my broken cartwheel without being asked. Maya bringing me cinnamon tea because she noticed my cough lingering. A mailroom employee staying late to help another worker finish packages before a storm arrived. Human beings are complicated that way. Darkness and kindness existing in the same building, sometimes on the same floor. Then Thursday morning arrived. I remember the smell first. Burnt toast from the cafeteria downstairs. Fresh rain drifting through the lobby doors. Somebody's floral perfume lingering too strongly in the elevator. I was polishing the brass railings near reception when Derek walked in with two visiting investors wearing charcoal suits and polished watches. He noticed me immediately. "This place usually looks cleaner than this," he muttered loudly. The lobby was spotless. One investor glanced toward me politely. "Looks fine to me." Derek laughed. "Trust me. Standard slip when you let people get too comfortable." My throat tightened. He wasn't even talking to me anymore. He was performing for them. As they walked toward the elevators, one of the investors turned back briefly and gave me an apologetic smile. Tiny gesture, barely a second long, but it mattered, because sometimes kindness survives even inside ambitious rooms. That afternoon, Harold called me again. "It's time," he said quietly. I stood alone inside a supply closet, holding a stack of folded towels, while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. "Tomorrow?" I asked. "Yes." I closed my eyes. For 3 years, I had watched people reveal themselves when they believed status protected them from consequences. Some disappointed me. Some restored my faith entirely. And tomorrow, every mask inside Belmere would finally come off. Stay with me, because what happens next changed everything. The truth came out on a Friday morning, so quiet it almost felt ordinary. That's what I remember most. Not thunder, not shouting, just the soft hum of air conditioning and sunlight spreading across marble floors, while people carried coffee cups through the lobby believing the day would unfold like every other day before it. I arrived at 5:30 wearing the same pale blue janitor uniform I had worn for 3 years. Same black ribbon in my hair. Same peppermint candies in my pocket. I vacuumed hallways, emptied bins, refilled soap dispensers, and all morning my heart beat strangely slow. At 9 o'clock, Harold sent a company-wide message requesting all department heads and staff gather in the executive conference hall at 10 sharp for an ownership announcement regarding the acquisition. The building buzzed immediately. People whispered near elevators. Phones rang constantly. Employees speculated about layoffs, mergers, promotions. I passed groups talking in excited voices while pretending not to notice me. At 9:50, I pushed my cleaning cart toward the conference hall one last time. The room smelled like fresh coffee and expensive cologne. Rows of chairs faced the stage at the front. Glass walls overlooked the city's skyline, glowing pale, silver beneath cloudy skies. Nearly every seat was filled. Derek stood near the front laughing with Vanessa. Maya sat quietly near the back, clutching a notebook against her chest. Nobody paid attention when I entered except Derek, whose smile faded immediately. "We're about to start," he said sharply. "You can come back later." I kept walking. "I won't be cleaning today," I answered calmly. A few nearby employees exchanged confused looks. Derek sighed impatiently. "Ellie, seriously." Before he could finish, Harold stepped onto the stage. The room slowly quieted. Harold adjusted his glasses, glanced toward me briefly, then faced the employees. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "As many of you know, Belmere Technologies has been undergoing evaluation before finalizing a major acquisition deal." People shifted nervously in their seats. Harold continued carefully. "During this process, the board conducted an extended internal review of company culture, leadership conduct, and employee relations." I saw Derek straighten slightly. Then Harold said the sentence that changed the entire room. "The majority owner overseeing that review has been working inside this company anonymously for the last 3 years." Silence. Confused murmurs spread instantly. I could feel people looking around trying to understand. Harold turned toward me, and suddenly every sound inside the room disappeared. "Most of you know her as Ellie." Nobody moved. I walked slowly toward the stage, while dozens of faces stared at me with widening eyes. My shoes sounded unnaturally loud against the floor. Somewhere near the back, somebody whispered, "What?" Derek looked pale already. Harold's voice remained steady. "This is Eleanor Price, co-founder and majority owner of Belmere Technologies." The silence afterward felt enormous. Not dramatic, not explosive, just stunned. I stood beside Harold still, wearing my janitor uniform, while people tried reconciling the woman they ignored with the name hanging in the company lobby downstairs. Vanessa's mouth parted slightly. Maya looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Derek finally laughed once, awkward and thin. "Wait," he said. "This is some kind of joke." Harold didn't answer him. Instead, he handed me the microphone. My hands felt strangely calm. "I came back because I wanted to understand what Belmere had become," I said softly. "Not through reports, not through meetings, through people." Nobody interrupted. "For 3 years, I cleaned your offices. I listened to your conversations. I watched how you treated receptionists, interns, security guards, cafeteria workers, and each other." Several employees lowered their eyes. "I watched people offer kindness when they believed nobody important would notice. I glanced toward Maya, and I watched others mistake power for character." The room remained painfully quiet. Then Derek stood. "With respect," he said carefully, though his voice trembled slightly. If this was some sort of test, nobody knew they were being evaluated. I looked at him for a long moment. "Exactly." His face changed then. Not anger at first. Fear. Because deep down, most people already know who they are when nobody's watching. Derek swallowed hard. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No," I interrupted gently. "There hasn't." I reached into the folder Harold had prepared and removed several papers. "On March 14th, you publicly took credit for work completed by Maya Hernandez." Her eyes widened instantly. "On April 2nd, you recommended eliminating maintenance staff during restructuring while simultaneously approving executive renovation bonuses. And over the last year, there have been 14 separate complaints regarding intimidation within your department." Nobody breathed. Derek looked around the room as if searching for support, but nobody spoke. Even Vanessa stared down at her hands. I continued quietly. "Do you know the strange thing about disrespect, Derek?" His jaw tightened. It always reveals more about the person giving it than the person receiving it. The city outside the windows looked washed silver beneath approaching rain. Somewhere in the building, an elevator bell chimed faintly. Small sounds suddenly felt enormous. Derek tried speaking again, but his confidence had disappeared completely now. "I didn't know who you were." "That's the point," I said softly. Those words settled over the room, heavier than shouting ever could have. I saw realization move through people one face at a time. Not just fear of consequences, something deeper. Embarrassment, shame, recognition. because many of them remembered moments they thought invisible. The receptionist they ignored, the cleaner they mocked, the intern they interrupted. Maya began crying quietly near the back row. I stepped down from the stage and walked toward her slowly while the room remained frozen. "You deserved better," I told her gently. She covered her mouth with trembling fingers. "I thought maybe I was weak." "No," I said. "You were kind. There's a difference." Behind us, Harold announced leadership restructuring would begin immediately. Derek's employment was terminated effective that day, pending further investigation into management conduct. Vanessa resigned before noon. But honestly, those consequences mattered less to me than the silence filling that room. Because for the first time, everyone inside Belmere saw each other clearly. Not titles, not salaries, human beings. As employees slowly filed out afterward, many avoided my eyes entirely. Others apologized awkwardly. A few cried. One older accountant stopped beside me near the doors. "I never said anything cruel," he whispered, "but I never stopped it either." I nodded slowly. Silence can become a decision too. He looked devastated by that. And standing there in my janitor uniform beneath cold conference lighting, I realized the hardest truths are rarely loud. They arrive quietly, and once people see them, they can never fully look away again. Stay with me, because what happens next changed everything. The strangest part about revealing the truth wasn't the shock on people's faces. It was how quiet the building became afterward. Belmere had always been noisy before. Phones ringing, forced laughter spilling from conference rooms, fast footsteps rushing through hallways. But after that Friday meeting, the entire company moved differently. Like everyone suddenly became aware of each other's existence in a deeper way. For the first few days, employees barely knew how to speak to me. Some overcompensated with awkward politeness. Others avoided me completely out of embarrassment. A few resigned before leadership reviews even began. The elevators grew quieter. Meetings shortened. People started saying thank you to cafeteria workers and holding doors open for custodians. Not because they feared another hidden owner, because shame had forced them to recognize what they'd become. I continued wearing my janitor uniform for another 2 weeks. That surprised people most. Harold asked if I wanted an executive office prepared immediately, but I told him no. I wasn't interested in dramatic transformations. I didn't suddenly become important because others learned my name. I had always been important. So had the receptionist downstairs. So had the night security guard eating microwave dinners at midnight. So had Maya, especially Maya. A few days after the announcement, I found her sitting alone near the rooftop terrace during lunch break. Wind moved gently through her dark hair, while traffic murmured far below the building. She looked exhausted. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. She laughed softly. "You own the company." I asked if I could sit. That made her smile for real. I lowered myself beside her carefully, feeling my knees ache the way they always did in colder weather. For a while neither of us spoke. We just watched clouds drifting over the city. Finally she asked quietly, "Did it hurt?" "What?" "The way people treated you." I thought about that honestly before answering. Sometimes, I admitted, but not for the reasons people assume. She waited. "I've been wealthy a long time, Maya. I know who I am. Cruel words don't change that." I folded my hands together slowly. What hurt was watching people abandon kindness so easily when they believed there would be no consequences. Her eyes watered slightly again. "I almost quit," she whispered. "I know." "How?" "Because I nearly quit once too." She turned toward me. I smiled faintly. Not from Belmere. From believing decent people could survive inside business at all. The wind carried the distant smell of rain and traffic exhaust across the rooftop. Somewhere below us, sirens echoed through downtown streets. "I'm glad you stayed," I told her. A week later, Belmere held its first all-staff meeting under the new leadership structure. Not in the executive conference hall. In the cafeteria. I chose that intentionally. The room smelled like coffee and toasted bread, while employees gathered around simple folding tables instead of polished executive seating. No stage, No dramatic lighting. Just people. I spoke for nearly an hour that morning. Not about profits. About dignity. I told them Belmere would remain financially ambitious, but never at the expense of humanity. Management evaluations would now include employee treatment reviews. Support staff wages would increase immediately. Anonymous complaints would receive independent oversight. Internship protections would strengthen. And then I said something Walter once told me during our hardest years. The way people treat those with less power than themselves reveals the kind of world they're helping create. Nobody applauded dramatically afterward. They just listened. Sometimes silence means people are finally hearing something true. Derek tried contacting me twice after his termination. The first email blamed stress. The second apologized. I answered neither immediately. Not because I hated him. Truthfully, hatred exhausts me now. Age teaches you most cruelty grows from insecurity people refuse to confront inside themselves. But forgiveness and accountability are not the same thing. 3 weeks later, I finally agreed to meet him at a small diner near the lake outside town. He arrived early, nervous, smaller somehow, without the confidence his office once gave him. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, and rain tapped softly against the windows while old country music played low through ceiling speakers. "I was awful to you," he admitted quietly after sitting down. "Yes," I said. He stared at his hands. I keep replaying everything I said. I watched an elderly waitress refill sugar dispensers near the counter before answering. "Do you know what troubled me most?" He shook his head. "You weren't cruel because you were angry." I met his eyes calmly. "You were cruel because it entertained you." That landed harder than shouting ever could have. His face folded slightly then, like something inside him finally cracked open enough to let honesty through. "I don't know when I became that person," he whispered. I believed him, because people rarely notice their own moral decline while it's happening. It arrives slowly, one ignored conscience at a time. When we left the diner, rain had stopped. The lake looked silver beneath the cloudy afternoon sky. "I hope this changes you," I told him before walking away. "Not punishes, changes." Months passed. Belmere slowly became softer around the edges after that. Not perfect. No company ever is. Human beings carry flaws everywhere they go. But kindness started surviving there more openly. Maya eventually became project director for community development programs. Luis from security now supervised employee wellness operations. The receptionist who once cried in the restroom began leading administrative training sessions with surprising confidence. And me? I finally moved into the small corner office Harold insisted I take, though I kept my janitor cart parked beside the door for nearly a month afterward, mostly as a reminder. Sometimes I still clean my own office late in the evening when everyone leaves. Old habits stay close. A few nights ago, I stood alone by the windows watching the city lights shimmer against rain-dark streets far below. The building behind me had grown quiet again, but this silence felt different from before, warmer somehow. I thought about how easily people measure worth through appearances, expensive suits, job titles, clean hands, loud confidence, and I wondered how many good souls spend their lives overlooked simply because the world taught others not to see them. Before leaving that night, I walked through the lobby and paused beside the framed company photograph again. My younger face still smiled from behind the glass beside Walter's, but now something had changed. Fresh flowers sat beneath the frame. No note attached, just flowers. And somehow that small anonymous gesture meant more to me than any boardroom applause ever could. So let me ask you something. Have you ever realized too late that someone you overlooked was carrying more wisdom, pain, or dignity than anyone else in the room? If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment below, and subscribe so you never miss a story. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, you are never alone.